Ladies and gentlemen, your favorite white colonizer, Tall the Traveling Clack, coming to you live from the United States of America. We're looking at a video called Why Israel and Palestine Hate Each Other. I'm curious if I'm even going to agree with this. Let's take a look.
Hamas has launched a full-scale attack on Israel, murdering over 1,000 innocent civilians in the single largest mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust. This attack has outraged many nations across the world and has triggered what is likely to be the region's bloodiest conflict in over 50 years. Now, as justification for these attacks, Hamas and Hezbollah, and even some left-wing political activists in the West, have long argued that Israelis are nothing more than colonizers and settlers. And in the wake of the Hamas massacre...
Your favorite white colonizer Zionist prince, by the way. Favorite. Look at that. That's white-colored skin. I deserve to die. So does my grandma.
Several academics in the U.S. and in Europe even cheered on these killings as an act of decolonization. So this begs the question, are Israelis really colonizers that have no relevant claim or justification to have a homeland in the region?
Yes.
Well, in order to consider that, let's conduct a
absolutely
brief review of the history of the area known as the Levant. The first large-scale settlement by the Jewish people began in the Levant during the Bronze Age, roughly around the 13th century BC. This was known as the time of the Judges. This was followed by the unified Israelite kingdom under the kings Saul, David, and finally Solomon, which lasted from 1020 BC to 930 BC. The kingdom was then divided between the two Jewish kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Israel lasted till 720 BC when it was destroyed by the Assyrian Empire, and Judah lasted till 586 BC when it was destroyed by the Babylonian Empire. And from that time till 1948, the territory would be fought over and controlled by several empires, to include the Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Romans, Byzantines, the Arab Caliphates, which started around 633 AD, the Crusader kingdoms, back to the Arabs, and then would be conquered and remain under the rule of the Ottoman Empire until its defeat in World War I. And during this entire time, there had been an unbroken population of ethnic Jews living in the area known as the Levant. In fact, the name Palestine was not the official name of the region until Roman Emperor Hadrian put down a major Jewish revolt resorting to near total genocide of the Jewish people and then renaming the province from Judea to Palestine as an insult to the Jews. Now, let us look at the modern era. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I marked a pivotal moment in the history of the region because the Ottomans had controlled the land that now encompasses Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. Ultimately, Britain took direct control over what became known as the Mandate of Palestine and the Emirate of Transjordan in 1920, and they continued to rule these areas until 1948. But following centuries of persecution culminating in the Holocaust, it was acknowledged by many that the Jewish people needed a homeland and that the territory within the Levant made sense given both the presence of a Jewish population and the long-term historical and religious connection to the region. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a plan to partition the British territory into separate Jewish and Arab states. And that plan was accepted by the Jewish leadership, but rejected by the Arab states, leading to the First Arab-Israeli War. And since then, multiple wars have been fought in 1967, 1973, among many other smaller engagements and conflicts. And over the last 50 years, Israel has managed to normalize and improve relations with some of its historical enemies. But lasting peace and recognition of Israel's right to exist has been difficult to achieve, largely because of the emergence of terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, who have continued to wage war on Israel for decades. These groups and many Western academics have gone so far as to justify even the most heinous acts deliberately targeting civilians as justifiable in a war of decolonization. But here's the thing. Jews have been living in this region for over 3,000 years. To accuse Israel of colonization doesn't make a great deal of sense given the history. If a Jewish homeland in the Levant is colonization, wouldn't a Palestinian state be one as well? Not to mention that there are already several Arab states in the region, with most of them existing on land that was originally taken through conquest. So look, if the argument is that despite the fact...
Sir, I don't know your name. I've reacted to a few videos of yours, but very, very good. Very good job, sir. Keep cooking.
There are several Arab and Muslim states in the region, that the Arab and Muslim populations of the Levant should be able to have their own state. That is an argument that many can understand, and one that Israelis have even agreed to. But if the argument is that Israel as a state has no right to exist and is nothing more than foreign conquerors, I'm sorry, but to believe that requires a lack of understanding of the history of the region, not to mention a pretty intellectually inconsistent view of conquest and colonization. But their overall argument is even worse than that. They are attempting to justify the deliberate murdering, kidnapping, and raping of innocent civilians in order to achieve a political objective. So, ask yourself this. With these sort of false justifications being used to prop up the worst of atrocities, would you want to live next to a state with a charter that not only justified, but rewarded the killing of you and your loved ones?
Note: we don't want to live in Palestine. Thank you so much. Okay, fantastic video. I agree with 99% of it. And I will say also that there's a few nuances he left out, and that's why your boy, the traveling butthole, is here to supply you with supplementary information. Two things I want to touch on, personally. One is the name Palestine. He doesn't mention that Palestinians, the pro-Palestinians, and the pro-Palestinian side has gravitated to the idea that Plishtim, or the Philistines, who was an arch nemesis nation from the Aegean Sea, it was a Greek people, or a Greek Cypriot type people, they used to be known as the Sea People, who sailed and then settled near Gaza, and were enemies of the ancient tribes of Israel and Judah. That Israel fought off a war with them and won. That is the claim that Palestinians use nowadays, amongst other things, which are crazy theories, but they use that to say that is our ancestral Palestinian ethnicity slash heritage. They not only say, they also say that they were the original Jews and they're the original Israelites. They also say that they were the Canaanites. They also say that they're the Phoenicians, and they also say that they're the Egyptians, and they also say that they're the Arabs. So Palestinians have it all. They're everything and nothing at the same time. But that is an important narrative to bring up, because the Philistines and modern day Palestinian people most likely have nothing to do with each other. And Palestinian DNA, when you look into it, a lot of it has ancient Levantine / Canaanite DNA, not Philistine DNA, so not DNA that came from somewhere else, or ancient Arab DNA, or ancient African DNA. So the Gazan groups, a lot of times, these have nothing to do with the Levant at all. They come from the Egyptian area. That's why a lot of them have the last name Al-Masri, which literally means the Egyptian. And then when it comes to groups of them in the Galilee in the north, a lot of them are Al-Halabi, which means the ones from the north, from Syria, who came from Halab, Aleppo, Syria, and they have nothing to do really with this region as well. The whole question though is that you don't, and this is the second follow-up thing that I wanted to say, is that there were groups of Ashkenazi Jews who were making aliyah to the state of Israel, or to the land of Israel, to the land controlled as Palestine at the point in time for several thousand years. Jews that ended up in Europe, who ended up in Spain, who ended up in Poland, who ended up in Germany, Sephardim and Mizrahim, or Sephardim and Ashkenazim, had been making aliyah consistently to Israel over the thousands of years that they were in diaspora, before the Arabs even came about, before they were even a group, before Islam was even a group. If you look at aliyot, you have aliyot from the 1500s, from the 1600s, from the 1400s, of Jews who left Europe and actually went back into the frontier and said, I'm coming back to live in Israel. And this happened over time, and they intermixed with the group of Jews who never left, and they intermixed with the group of Jews who came from the Mizrach, who came as Mizrahim, who were the first proper aliyot we know of, are Jews that came in from Yemen in the 1400s, and also in the 1700s, and in the 1800s. People like to make it seem like these Jews just came from Europe because of the Holocaust at one point in time. This is not true. There was always did you know something I learned recently about my ethnicity, right? The Iraqi Jews. It was so hostile to Jewish people in Palestine at the time that throughout the ages, Iraqi Jews, when they actually started making money and had power in Iraq, at certain points in history, they used to go on pilgrimages to Israel and then come back to Baghdad because it was too dangerous for them to resettle in Palestine or in Israel. They would come and make pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to their holy sites, and go back to Baghdad because it was too dangerous for them to settle in Israel. That's how dangerous Israel was at the time, because it was always warring and there was always problems there. So they went back to Baghdad until a certain point in time where the Palestinians decided to convince Hitler that it would be a good idea to start doing his anti-Semitic bullshit in Iraq as well and around the Arab world. And then you ended up with a pogrom called the Farhud in 1941, June 1st and June 2nd, that kicked my family out of Baghdad where they were for 2,000 years. And that's how we ended up back in Israel. Guess what, motherfucker? You kicked us out of our home the first time around and then brought us right back, Palestinians. How dumb could you be? And then you tell me to go back? No, fuck you. You kicked me out of my home in the first place, and then you brought me back. I'm staying now, and I'm taking my kafia with me. It's mine now. I was looking for my kafia. It's right over there. I don't feel like bringing it over. Anyways, very great video. Hope you guys liked a little bit of nuance. If it didn't make sense, rewatch it again. Maybe you will piece it together. There's a lot that my brain sometimes goes a little ADD with all the information that's in there. That's why it's important to bring me to talk at your community, because it's way more organized when I do the talk. And I'm currently in the United States of America looking for communities to speak to. So email me at collab.travelingclad@gmail.com and bring me over to your local community so I can speak with you guys and do an incredible speaking engagement. We just did it across the Caribbean. It was immensely successful. Spoke to thousands of people and changed a lot of people's minds. And I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you a long time. Goodbye, Klotz. If you believe in my content and want to support me, just know your help is needed. There's a bunch of great ways to support me, being PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, or joining my Patreon community down below. Patreon is the best way to support my channel, and you'll get a bunch of cool perks depending on what tier you join. Another great way to support me is by buying my merchandise on thetravelingclat.com. I regularly drop new merch designs like this beautiful hat, or this amazing shirt, where you can support the channel and get something cool for yourself. I also have an amazing Discord community with people from all over the world. Thank you so much for your support.